First off, I'm going to go to Google right now, and I'm going to type in Martin Luther King. Okay, so now I'm going to enter, and now I need to change it to an image search. Now, once you're in the image search, everybody watch, okay? I need to find a picture of Dr. King. All right, so I'm going to click on the picture, and it's going to bring it up here. Now, you could copy and paste this into Photopea, but I'm going to do something different, okay? I like this picture because it's got his whole head. Nothing's cut off. So let me click on this picture, but I'm going to right-click on it, and instead of copy image, I'm going to open image in new tab. And once I have that new tab open, if there's a plus sign here, hit the plus sign, because that'll give me the full resolution of the image, okay? That means I've got more pixels to work with. So I hope everyone's paying attention to this. I'm now going to save image as, and you see how it's got some weird, stupid, bizarre name that doesn't make any sense? It's going to be really hard for me to find this image. So I'm going to rename it MLK Jr., and I'm going to make sure that it's on my desktop so that you can pick your destination so you can find it later. So I'm going to hit save, and it's going to save as a JPEG image. So now I'm going to go to Photopea. Okay. And now in Photopea, I want to make a poster of Martin Luther King Jr. I can't just take this image and hand it in and say, I made a poster, because that wouldn't be my original work. So I'm going to do File Open, and I'm going to go to the desktop, and I'm going to go to Date Modified Today, and I have two different images here, Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King. I'm going to pick Martin Luther King, and I'm going to open it. All right, now first off, I don't know how big this image is, so let me do this. Let me do image size. Okay, and let me find out how big it is. So it's on pixels. I don't understand that, so I'm going to go to inches. Okay, and so you see the height and the width. So that's really a big image. So I'm going to change it to, I'm going to change the height to like 8.5 inches. And then if I hit this chain, it'll fix the width as well. Okay. Now, if I was going to print this, I would have to change the DPI to 300, but we're not printing these, so it's okay to leave it at 72. So I'm going to hit OK. All right. And now I'm going to do select all, edit, copy, and I'm going to create a new document. And that document is going to be for screen, and it's going to be full HD. And the reason why I'm doing that is this is the size of like a YouTube video. It could be the size of like a slideshow. It's a good size. This is actually the 16:9 size of your average video. So now I can do edit, paste, and now I can make my collage because I have enough room to work with. So I'm going to take him and I'm going to move him to the side here. And then I can get another image of Dr. King and another image and another image and play around with it. But before I do that, I want to go back here and I'm going to play around with how this looks. And there's several different ways to do it. So one way is to go image, adjustments, and posterize. This is a fun filter. Okay, see that? So I can mess around with how it looks, and I've changed it a little bit. Okay, so you can play around with that. I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna X this out. But if I wanted to keep this, I would hit OK. So that's one way you can change the way something looks. The other way is, now remember, everything's selected. I did select all. The other way is through a filter. Okay, so there's all sorts of different filters. And you want to pick one that's respectful. You don't want to, distort the person or make them look stupid because you're trying to honor them. But let me see what happens if I pick one of these filters. A lot of them I haven't tried yet. So let me try oil paint. I'm moving it to the side, but I can actually change how it looks. Okay, so you can really mess around with how things look. I'm not going to go into the rest of the filters. They're here. So you can either do image adjustments, posterize, or you can do a photo filter. Again, under image adjustments, you can try a photo filter, which will give you like all sorts of different, like you can give you like a sepia tone or something. You can actually change the size of the filter, so you can give it like a blue. Okay, so there's all sorts of different ways you can experiment with how a picture looks. And sometimes it's nice after you've made a poster and you have 5 or 6 different pictures here, and some are black and white and some are in color, and you want to give your poster an overall look. Putting a photo filter on all of it can be a very nice touch to kind of unify your composition. But I want to talk to you guys now about lettering. So I'm going to go here to T for type, okay? And now I'm in T for type. And now if you look here, there's different styles of lettering. And you can see a preview of the style of lettering. Now, one thing about posters is you don't want a script font that's really hard to read. So you might be better off with a font that's more block letters, that's easy to read. So I'll pick this one, okay? The other thing is the size of the pixels. You can adjust that. And you can also adjust what color you want your letters to be. So I may decide I want, say, red letters, okay? So I've got red letters. I've got this font. Now I'm going to pull out a text box, okay? And now you've got to decide, do you want your letters justified left, justified right? I want mine centered, so I'm going to go here. And now I'm going to just start typing. Now, the difficult thing here is there is no spell check in Photopea or in Photoshop. So you might want to keep in mind that if you spell somebody's name wrong, it could mess up your whole poster, and there's no way to really catch it, okay? Now, before I do anything else, if I want to change the size of the type, I highlight it, and then I can make it bigger, okay, or smaller. All right, now, the other thing that you should be aware of is warp, okay? So if I want to make the type curved or interesting in any way, shape, or form, you go to Style. And so I'm going to pick Arc, and it can actually arch the type. But if you go like this, it'll arch it the other way. Don't worry if it goes off the edge of the page, because you can always move it later. But there are other styles. So, for instance, you could do a flag. That might be really cool, or a wave or something like that. You can also do something like, so for instance, I picked a flag. So what's to stop me from taking this type here, highlighting it, and just changing this type to blue? I already have that it's a flag. Okay, so you can really play around with type and shape and stuff and make your fonts and your, it's not just the font, you can make the shape of your type interesting, or make it have some sort of meaning beyond what you'd originally thought, just by changing the color and changing the shape or the warp. Okay, now there are a lot of different styles here, but the one thing that's extremely important to understand is that you need it to still be readable. If it's too scripty, or if it's a light color against a light background, there are other ways that it's hard to read. you might need to mess around with that. Okay, so make sure, because think of this as a poster, that people who walk by should be able to read the words immediately, and that it's not really good if it's hard to read the words. Okay, so now I'm going to hit the check mark, and that keeps the text the way it is. But let's say I want to go back and edit the text later. Okay, so I'm going to change this around, and I need to edit the text later. I'm in a different layer. I'm adding in things, and I decide that, oops, I forgot that his name was Martin Luther King Jr. So I go back here to the text layer and make sure I'm clicked on the T for text, and then I can add in. Okay, and now it doesn't really look that great because Junior, I don't want it on its own line, so I can change the size of the text. So you can always go back in and re-edit text if you want to. Now, so I still want it on a different line. There we go. Okay, and then I can move it. So you can always go back and re-edit text later. The only way that you're going to mess it up so that you can't re-edit the text later is if you rasterize it. So let's say I want to do edit, transform, perspective. It's letting me, but it's not really letting me. Like it's letting me change the size, but it's not really letting me warp it. So let's say I want to do edit, transform, I don't know, a warp, it won't let me. See how it's grayed out? If I hit free transform, some stuff will work, like I can rotate it, but I can change the size, I can stretch it, but I can't really do some of the other things. So if you really, really, really need to warp the text, and you find that using this warp tool doesn't work up here and you need to rasterize it, understand that you're not going to be able to edit it later. So now I'm going to rasterize it. Now it's made of pixels, the same as this face here is made of pixels. Okay. So now if I do edit, transform, warp, I can now warp the text in different ways, and I have a lot more control. But the downside is if I made a spelling mistake or something, I really can't do anything with that. I can't change what the words say anymore. Okay, so that and plus you may not want to do this with a poster anyway, because you might find that if you do this with a poster, it'll be really hard to read. Okay, so while it's fun to mess around with this, it may not actually be conducive to a good poster. So just keeping it as a text layer, not rasterizing it, and just making use of this warp and this edit transform tool should probably be enough. And I would just keep it as a text layer. And my advice is not to rasterize it. Okay, so now the other thing that's interesting that you can do with text is this: layer style, and there's all sorts of neat things. I'm going to pick drop shadow. Okay, and this is hella cool. Look at that. And you can actually, play around with making the drop shadow and having it look interesting. Okay, so I gave you all the fun things you can do, not everything, but some of the fun things you can do with the text tool. I gave you some of the fun things you can do with the edit, image adjustments, posterize or image adjustments, photo filters, and also the filters here. Okay, so you guys now have a lot of fun tools to work with. When you're ready to export your file, when you're done with the project, I want you to do two things. File, save as PSD, will save it as a Photoshop file where it'll preserve all the layers. And this is very important because it will enable you later to go back and fix things. So for instance, if I spelled somebody's name wrong or I just want to tweak a certain layer, I don't have to redo the whole thing. So you want to do File, Save as PSD, which PSD stands for Photoshop Document. And you're going to put that into Google Classroom. And then your next step when you're totally done and you're ready to submit the project is you're going to do File, Export as, and I want you to export it as a JPEG and put that into Google Classroom and then hit Submit.